Nintendo 64.
Power up. Speed.
It feels like Nintendo was deep in the business of fucking up in the Nintendo 64 era, whilst Argonaut was willing to put Yoshi in a charming, inventive platform game. Nintendo decided that wasn't good enough and instead put him in this.
Oh.
In what would be just one of Nintendo's missteps, Croc became Croc purely out of necessity. Obviously, Argonaut could not continue to use Yoshi in the game, so Croc is your replacement. However, Nintendo's loss is our gain. I would much rather have a new, unique IP than a game starring a character from an already established franchise. Croc is certainly remembered, but fondly I'm not so sure. At the time, Croc was viewed well, but not without its problems, of which we'll be getting to now. Croc is infamous for its janky, frustrating controls, and for the most part, it's warranted. Croc is kinda tank controls. It's hard to explain. Using the D-pad, this is tank controls 100%, but with the analog sticks, so the camera will always be behind Croc unless you turn it manually with the right stick. Croc will move forward by pressing the left stick up, but can move left and right whilst continuing to move forward. It's only if you press the stick ever so slightly that Croc will tank control himself left or right. It's this weird mix of tank controls and slight influences from Mario 64 and Crash. Croc has one of the weirder controls in analog and camera that I've ever come across. Obviously, coming out after Mario 64, Croc has nowhere to hide, no excuses, and yeah, Croc doesn't feel great. It isn't impossible though, and can for the most part be a lot of fun, but it isn't like Mario 64's control style wouldn't have made Croc like 70% more fun. Regardless, everything else feels great. Controls are responsive, and Croc's moveset is super simple but effective. Croc can jump, attack, butt slam, and jump. Honestly, the majority of your moveset throughout is going to be jumping, but why not? Croc's platforming is pretty great feeling, and when you get used to the control scheme, it all forms into place quite nicely. Croc mechanically is as unorthodox as history told us, but I'm not so sure it's quite as frustrating. Let's talk less about the mechanics behind the gameplay and talk about what we actually do with Croc. Croc is 99% very linear, with a room-by-room method of exploring the world. It all feels consistent, but it is given to you in increments, and as such, it is a lot less exploration-based than a game like Mario 64. However, the linearity isn't really a negative, and not every game has to follow a non-linear, open sandbox design. Even Mario eventually learned that. Jump on boxes, get gems or orbs or whatever, get lives, get secret gems, get to the end of the game. The game stays fun enough that it isn't boring to do these collection type challenges, but you get nothing! Basically nothing for doing them. making it a rather short game if you didn't bother to collect things along the way. The problem with this is that there is only so much time you can find jumping on the same platforms entertaining. Eventually, it is going to take a toll on you. This is really the biggest problem Croc suffers from. It's the lack of inventiveness in obstacles. Everything is to be jumped on, enemies are one and done destroyed. It's not that Croc isn't difficult, the problem is its difficulty is there for kind of the wrong reasons, the main one being the control scheme. Croc isn't a hard game, but its controls will make sure that your life counter stays pretty modest. If one thing works in Croc's favor the majority of its length, it's the atmosphere. It's simple, charming as fuck, and has an aesthetic theme that is consistent throughout. It may not look like anything outstanding thematically, but the beautifully simplistic nature of the worlds on display here is worth commending. If there's one other small disappointment, I guess, I would probably shout out the lack of a hub world. Being a big fan of them, it's a little disappointing to see a Mario 3 / kind of Crash Bandicoot-esque map of sorts. A hub world always brings together things for me, and it makes it feel very cohesive, but this is a small issue, and it's a very subjective thing anyway, and there really is a consistent gorgeousness to Croc's world. Bosses are a part of Croc, but not exactly a positive. They feel so tacked on. Every boss essentially comes down to the same thing. It's just dodge and attack, boss is confused, attack boss, win. The biggest issue is that you feel no real, gravity to when the boss, when you attack the boss. The boss doesn't make a sound, there's no invincibility frames, nothing indicates you attacked it, aside from the boss kinda moving goofy or something. Bosses are not very interesting, but I thought I'd at least mention them quickly. So what of Croc's soundtrack? I guess there isn't much to say, unfortunately. Seems like it's becoming a theme. It has a main theme, it has a really awesome overworld song, and okay, I'm gonna go off on a tangent for a second here. Hell, there isn't really much to say on this one, so I'm just gonna take this opportunity to shout this out. Has anyone else realized that the theme song for Mario 3D World sounds insanely similar to Croc's theme song? Look, I'm gonna put these melodies together. See? Well, anyway, let's wrap this up. I really shouldn't have spent this much time on this game already. Croc is an incredibly average game. It has great atmosphere, aesthetic, and the soundtrack is inoffensive, but the major part of the game, that being the gameplay, is compromised by a lack of inventiveness in platforming and bugged out mechanics, mostly the tank controls. Croc is a game worth playing once and once only, the shortness of the game lending some mercy to it. I don't plan on coming back, but I don't regret it hugely either. One day I'll come back to the franchise with Croc 2, but for now I'm gonna take a long break from Croc.